or mentally grows in comfort. We tend to
Yeah.
only grow in discomfort. We have to be willing to stretch and push and challenge. And it doesn't mean that we win every time, but you don't have to be an idiot about it either. You can research, you can test, and then when you're ready, pull the trigger. We don't want to have analysis paralysis, but at a certain point, when are we good to go? When can we pull that trigger and get ready to go? And that seems to help a lot.
Hello, everyone. Hello, and welcome back. It's your favorite time of the week. It's my favorite time of the week. As always, it's time for Leaders Talk. As usual, I am your host, Andrew Dupuy. I'm the head of communications here at Leaders Brands. And with me today, I have Chris Kluver. Chris is a very special guest for me today. Let me take a second to introduce you to him, and then, as usual, he'll have the floor with us for a bit. But yeah, Chris is the CEO of Entrepreneurial Advisors. And what he has done is only spent 35 years building, buying, selling, and advertising companies. He's acquired and sold almost 14 or over 14 businesses along the way. And over the course of his career, he's advised more than 150 companies. He's helped visionary leaders navigate challenges, scale their businesses, and create environments where success isn't just possible, it's inevitable. He is also a best-selling author. He's published 2 books in his past. And yeah, Chris, that's a quick start to everything, but welcome to the show and tell us a little bit about yourself in that context, and we can go from there.
Dude, Andrew, thank you so much, man, for having me on. I love being
Really,
here and
it's a
I
pleasure
love what
having
you're
you.
doing.
Yeah.
So thank you. So yeah, I mean, you read a lot of that. I primarily work with CEOs and
Right.
leadership teams now. I've had the good fortune to be a strategic advisor for a handful of companies where we've gone from entrepreneurial, 4 of them, all the way up to nearly $1 billion market caps. Had a really cool experience a couple weeks ago. Was able to join one of my teams when they were on the podium at the New York Stock Exchange and rang the bell. So
Awesome.
I feel like the luckiest cat on the planet because I get to do what I want to do, and I live buried in the mountains at 10,000 feet, 100 miles west of Denver, and man, I'd like to say I feel like the luckiest cat on the planet.
Well, and that's always the goal, isn't it? To be able to feel like what you've done in your life and your job makes you happy and, and lucky, and that's what everybody's trying to do, and make a little money along the way. Well, Chris, tell us a little bit about how you got into this, just kind of give our audience some context.
Well, if you go all the way back to the 80s, I'm 57 now, but when I started that era, entrepreneurship was a dirty word. And if you chose like you were going to go an entrepreneurial route, you were going to be basically be blackballed from corporate America. And I chose to go
Okay.
that route early and started my
Okay.
first company at 19 where I did clothing design, manufacture, and wholesale. It was fun. Um, but it's through that I realized through all that evolution and the work that I do with leadership teams and individuals is that there are people who are built for this. There are people who want it, and anybody can have it. But it's a matter of completely changing the narrative and redefining what success looks like, but defining success on your terms. Meaning, so many of us end up going through life reacting. Oh, I was good at math, so became an accountant. Oh, my dad knew somebody over here, so I got a job there. Oh, I started doing this, and we just sort of trip into life.
Correct.
And most people live life by reacting and tripping from one step to another to another. But the truly extraordinary leaders, the truly extraordinary people, look at it very, very differently. They say, "I want to go to that freaking mountain."
Yeah.
I want to climb that hill. And they're not sure how, but that's where they're going. And when you have that big audacious dream and direction of where you want to go, and you're willing to put the work in and have the self-awareness to grow and become better, well, it becomes a forcing device to say no to all that other noise. And that's where extraordinary really lives. I believe that extraordinary lives in all of us, but it's a matter of how do we choose to change that narrative and actually give ourselves permission to step out and maybe be a little uncomfortable and really go after it.
Yeah.
What do you
And
think?
that's yeah, and that's actually something that's interesting. Is it's about that thing that holds people back. The word discomfort, I think, comes in because there's a comfort zone in continuing to do corporate America and showing up for your jobs and getting your paycheck and doing all that. And I was doing that for many years in my own life until the opportunity with getting into entrepreneurial model publishing came up to me. And it was a risk. It was a risk that many people told me not to take. It's like stay in your zone. So not everybody has that in them to say, well, I'm going to take that leap. So what are some of the things that you talk to people about helping them kind of get over that fear and maybe find that part of themselves that is leading them to be an entrepreneur, or is it something that you can't coach?
I think you can coach. Not everybody's is built for it, but
Right,
most people are, and they can be. Um,
right,
I think it was interesting when you said that you had other people telling you don't do it, and they were advising you against it. The
right.
reality is that more often than not, we have a certain peer group around us, and likely that peer group is in a similar situation. And if
Hmm.
you choose to step out of that, well, they may say, be careful, be safe, be all these other things, because you're pushing their comfort zones, and because you're challenged, they're going to challenge themselves as well,
Yeah.
and they don't want to admit that. So I think that for entrepreneurship, for business, for all sorts of things, I've started a lot of companies. People say, "Oh, you're a big risk taker," and to me, man, I am not a risk taker. To me, a risky proposition would be working for someone where my mouth could get me fired because I am not a
Yeah.
quiet violet about saying things. But I think that in most cases, I have looked at hundreds of businesses and hundreds of opportunities. And so I'm originally from Nebraska, and Warren Buffett, I used to go down and I'd watch the Berkshire Hathaway meetings. And his number two, Charlie Munger, had a phraseology, a language that I really loved. He said, that people always said that he thought that Charlie would say, well, people always think that Warren and I are these soothsayers, that we're these gurus. We're not. He said, we look at a lot of stuff and we find a great deal. We dig in and we review, is this a great deal?
Yeah.
But if it's a good deal and we could kind of make it work, we won't do it. We only do no brainers. And I think that when you decide, I want to go here, I want to do something extraordinary, unreasonable, extraordinary lives in the unreasonable, be unreasonable. Think about those things, but then back into it and figure out, what do I need to do to test it, to research it, to define it, to put a deal together so that when it comes to true, it's like, man, I'd be an idiot not to do this. When you do that, it doesn't matter what anybody else says. But to
Hmm.
your point around discomfort, remember, my wife and I do some ultra events here in Leadville, and nobody physically or mentally grows in comfort. We tend to
Yeah.
only grow in discomfort. We have to be willing to stretch and push and challenge. And it doesn't mean that we win every time, but you don't have to be an idiot about it either. You can research, you can test, and then when you're ready, pull the trigger. We don't want to have analysis paralysis, but at a certain point, when are we good to go? When can we pull that trigger and get ready to go? And that seems to help a lot. But does that answer the question?
Yeah, yeah, it does. And I reference it because I know that one of the things that I run into a lot in publishing is that one of the things that keeps people back from writing a book is a lot of times that same kind of fear that they might have in starting a new business or becoming an entrepreneur. They also have that fear in putting out a book because they're afraid of, well, I'm not going to stand out, or they're afraid of the idea, well, but if it goes wrong, what if this is the one thing I've got that I put out and it doesn't do it? So they constantly have the whole what if, what if, what if, rather than the other side of that. It's like, what are the positives that can come? And so that kind of that fear-based environment holds them back. Do you see the same kind of things happening? And yeah, I know that you're an author when you were first starting to think about writing.
Oh my goodness, I'm dyslexic as hell. The idea that I would, I barely got through college. The idea that I could write books, let alone more than one, let alone something that won an award or two, is so humbling. But it's because of like what you guys do. You guys, so I could have said, well, I can't do this, or this is going to be hard, or this is going to suck. And I swear your subconscious is going, can't, hard, this is going to suck. And your subconscious is going to reaffirm that. But you
Yeah,
can say instead, I know I have some good stories. I know I believe I have something to offer that has an impact. How can I do it? Who can help me? What are those other opportunities? And start digging in and finding a group like you guys that can actually put that all together.
yeah,
Because I have the knowledge and the tools, but then you partner with a team like you guys, and you guys have the tools and resources to pull that all together and make it the way it should be. So I think a lot of times when it comes to how people are looking at things, rather than saying can't, how do you look at it as how? How do you transition that and say, where do I want to be? What does amazing look like? If I knew I couldn't fail, where would I be? All right,
Yeah.
who can help me? How can I figure that out? Rather than, oh, well, this is going to be hard and this is going to suck and I can't do this and so, and I see this over and over and over and over. The reality is I work with some public CEOs and other people, and dude, virtually everybody on the planet, unless you're a narcissist or a sociopath, has imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
Everybody, when they're really open and candid, they're going to be saying questions like, well, geez, I don't know. I'm not sure if I'm good enough. Or I don't know how to handle this, or I don't know what to do with this, or and that's where a lot of the strategic advisory work that I do for the high level is we're talking about how people are sleeping and how they're looking at things and acting as a sounding board and being fearless and challenging them and helping pump people up to keep them going. But it's the same thing that you guys do with the publishing. So
Yeah, and that's that's exactly it, and that's what I was hoping to get to, because what do you tell people then that have that's holding them back in such a way that they're just not ever doing anything and saying, I need to stand out? That's the question they ask. So they ask us that a lot, is publishers, like, I need to stand out. How do I stand out? So just in general, when someone comes to you and say, okay, Chris, I really want to take this move, but I've got an AI company and there's a million AI companies in the world. How am I going to be the one that's going to stand out and create that amazing idea?
So the biggest challenge I think that most of us have is we live in such a freaking noisy world.
Yeah, that's
We don't actually stop to think, and we don't learn to think, and we don't invest that time.
right.
So I believe that every individual, organization, leadership team is at one of four phases. It's stabilize, visualize, strategize, or execute.
Mhm.
Most people are living in a cortisol dump of constant emotion, constant freak out, constant worry, and they don't have time to even take a step and breathe. So sometimes we'll start very simply and like, how can you build some triage and come up with some arbitrage that says, I got 10 minutes a day to start thinking, 30 minutes a day to start thinking. Then the second phase then is for people to clearly define where do they want to be. And this can scare the pants off of people. And I work with ultra high net worth ultra high net worth people, billionaires, all sorts, people who've had huge exits, people who want to grow companies to amazing levels. But figuring out what amazing looks like, where do they want to go? And as a leader, and if you're writing a book, you are a leader. The idea is what does amazing look like? Where do you want to be with that? Coming up with a clear vision of what success looks like. And then from there, so that's we stabilize, we start having the time to think about it, we visualize where we want to go. Then we start to build a strategy. What do we need to do to achieve this? How do we back into that? And then now maybe the visualization, to your specific point, we don't know what that is yet. Okay.
Right.
Maybe we've got 3 or 4 ideas. Cool. How do we test it? How do you go out and start having conversations? How do you figure out and or how would you solve the problem yourself? Where would you go? How are people solving it today? There may be different ways of doing it. Who are you doing it for? What is the problem you're solving?
Yeah.
But once you start doing that, then you build the strategy, and then you have to execute with ruthless but compassionate accountability. Ultra consistent when you do it. But the biggest challenge is like, oh, I want to do something special. Okay, cool. What is it? Well, I don't know. Okay. What do you love? What wakes you up in the morning? Well, I like these things, but that doesn't pay anything. Well, if you like it and you're really passionate about it, you're probably going to do a better job with it. In my first book, The Aspiring Solopreneur, we talk a lot about how to break those pieces down into different ways and how do you find that thing that's really, really going to light you up, that makes you so happy and how you get there. And in my peer groups, we work quite a bit on those things where we help people to define what does success look like more on a holistic level. So when I say holistic, I think most people, when you ask them, dude, what does success look like? Well, They're going to go to the finances because those are the easiest metrics, the finances and the stuff, which is going to be okay. So I want a G5. I want a house in Maui. I want these, okay, there, I got these. Okay. Then what else? Well, and their heads kind of explode.
Yeah.
But if you can help people understand, look, maybe you're really family oriented and you want to be the absolute best spouse on the planet. You want to be an amazing parent. You want to be a friend that people can always trust and know that's there. Maybe you want to focus on your health, your physical, your mental, and your spiritual.
Mhm.
Maybe there's going to be, and then we have our resources, our time, our most valuable asset, our talent, and our treasure. And then lastly comes down to around the business, the physical, the accolades, the environment, things like that. If you can look at success differently and redefine it, that then can really help you define, man, where do I want to go? What does absolutely amazing look like in this case? And when you start to do that, it starts to help define success in a different way, which then could help you outline the impact that you can have for people in a different way. I don't know, Andrew, what do you think of that?
Well, I tell you what I think of that is that I like the way that you have phrased what does amazing look like. And I keep going back to that as you're talking about it, because what that immediately does is you asked that to me before this episode, and I had not been asked that question before. But what I liked was what that immediately made me do is immediately made me think about what's the best result that I can have off of doing the show with you today. It immediately put that into my mind. And then I also thought about that as you're talking about when you're approaching it with other businesses, like that visualization of what does amazing look like is really good. Not just pat you on the back, because you do immediately start to think about, in the context of what you're working on, what is that ultimate goal other than the G5 airplane and the things like that. So I mean, how did you come up with that? Is that just something that organically happened to you over time, or is it something that you learned through experience?
Oh, countless failures and falling down and screwing up and making a mess of stuff and but going through. But to me, it's the observation of working with hundreds of teams and
Right.
leaders
Okay.
and understanding that it's the idea of transitioning from that reactive state to a proactive state.
Yeah.
And the key with that is understanding, how do we define where we want to go? Because if we don't do that, you know, that's one of the key things that Elon Musk is, whether you love him or hate him, he's a brilliant guy. But one of the
Yeah.
key things he can do is he can redefine what amazing looks like. He breaks all the rules with that. So like when you walk into the place in Hawthorne, California, at SpaceX, there's two giant photos. One photo is as Mars sits today, and one photo as Mars as an inhabited planet as he envisions it. But
Hmm.
that right there defines what amazing looks like. And that gives everybody who walks through those doors a why. Why do they do what they do? And and if we can do that as leaders, we can do that for our own individual lives, we can do that for our health, we can do that for our relationships. But when we do that for businesses, that's when people really hit the gas, man. It's I've worked in and gone through that exercise with new companies. I remember one CEO, I had her pull me aside after the first year we did our strategic planning, and I really challenged and pushed and challenged to get them to think bigger. And they were going to go from, I think, 8 million to 18 million. And she pulled me aside and cussed me a blue streak. Like, what are you doing? This is going to be counterproductive. It's going to frustrate. But they dug in and they pushed on it. And Andrew, she called me the last week of the year crying, saying, "Holy shit, we hit everything." And that particular company, they went on such a massive skyrocket. They ended up selling for over in the high nine figures.
Yeah. Chris, I lost you.
And it's with that. Nope, did I
Hold
lose
on,
you?
Chris, I lost you there.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, it was. They ended up selling in the high nine figures, but then we lost connection for a second there.
Okay, I apologize.
Oh no,
Um,
yeah, no problem. I just want to. So hold on one sec, Ray. So let's take a look at this. Just do a cut. We'll segue into conversation. So just bring that together in the edit. Okay.
okay, so the point is, when you have people challenging on that, there's a beautiful quote from Henry Ford that says, "Whether you believe you can or whether you believe you can't, you're right."
Right.
So if you can, in your mind, visualize what it is, if you visualize what's possible, there's all sorts of quantum mechanics and things that people would argue you can actually attract that and drive
Yeah.
it. That gets a little in the hippie voodoo world for me, but I've seen it over and over and over and over. So to me, when we define unreasonable, extraordinary lives in the unreasonable, be unreasonable, dream big, be crazy. Don't be afraid of leaning into that. But when you do that, then it's going to help you recruit your subconscious to make sure that the right decisions are made. You
Mhm.
build that strategy, then you execute with ruthless but compassionate accountability. When you do that, nothing can stop you. It is absolutely
Yeah.
extraordinary.
In that, and it makes total sense because in my when I do coaching with book writing, there's actually some kind of a very similar thing that goes on in a person's mind, where when they're approaching a book, they don't really they try they start when they start writing a book, they always try to go a little small at first if it's the very first time they've ever done it. When I coach them, I say, well, don't necessarily do that. Think about the end in mind. Always think about what's that goal? What's the last chapter going to be? That's going to bring it all together and make it all work. And then you start to climb the ladder towards that rather than say, every single chapter I've got to just start fresh and do in my mind. So I think that a person's, when they are able to actually frame their thoughts that way, it does inspire them. It gets their creative juices flowing a lot more than it would be if they're just doing the whole corporate thing of, I have metrics to reach and I'm going to reach those metrics. And there's a certain amount we scale, there's a certain amount we do things, and that's the way that it's done. And that's when you start getting into a rut and getting into burnout
Absolutely.
and not funny. Yeah.
Well, because we're letting other people define that success. We're
Right.
letting other people, but so about 10 years ago, I had my hip and my knee replaced.
Yeah.
Sins of my youth, things that were,
Yeah.
all
I'm catching up on that
self-inflicted.
too. Yeah.
But after that, the year after that, I decided I was going to do an ultra marathon, and I'd never even done a marathon.
Yeah.
So I visualized what it would feel like to come across the finish line, tired but exhilarated, salty, sore, but just really, I could feel the warm sun on my face and all that. It didn't mean that I just sat down then and said, okay, and sat on the couch and ate ho-hos. It meant, holy crap. All right, that's what I want to do. Cool. What do I need to do? Well, I needed to lose some weight. I needed to get a great world-class coach. I needed to get the right gear. I needed to
Yeah.
show up every day, and I trained for 6 days a week, and I was able to complete it. Now, I walk them because I'm slow with it, but still being able to do an ultra marathon at that. But that was completely unreasonable. And I've seen that same thing happen in people's relationships. I've seen that
Yeah.
same thing happen in people's businesses. The company that we rang the bell with, they're a company from Nebraska, and they were able to go from entrepreneurial all the way to $1 billion market cap on the New York Stock Exchange.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen by people who are like, we'll see how this goes and good enough. No, those people are driving. They know where they want to go, and they're unreasonable about
Yeah. Well, Alenka will love that because her motto has always been ready, fire, aim.
it.
So we followed a little bit in those footsteps, and I think we can absolutely learn a lot from that. So speaking of learning some stuff, is there anything that you want our audience to just kind of take away from this? I always, as we kind of wind up, it's a golden nugget, just something that really encapsulates everything you've just said, but that you really feel like our audience must take away. Not that, I mean, honestly, this whole episode's kind of been a golden nugget because I love how we've reframed thinking. But yeah, is there anything that you could talk to our audience about in that direction?
Well, so I think that the three things I would look at are, number one is you got to be accountable for who you are. The person you saw this morning when you were brushing your teeth in the mirror is 100% accountable for everything, the good and the bad. And to be very, very blunt, life isn't fair. And as proof of that, if you're listening to this, it means you speak English and you're in the top tiny, tiny minority on the grand scheme of the planet. You are one of the lucky ones. So when we choose to take that accountability for ourselves, that's one thing. Two, the more fearless and the more audacious we're willing to dream, the more we can achieve. And three, when you are completely ruthlessly but compassionately accountable with yourself on what you're doing and you follow through, anything is possible. But if you can be accountable with your starting, be fearless in how big you're and willing to dream, build that plan, and then really dig in, anything is possible with it.
That's beautiful. Chris, how can our audience find out more about you?
Oh, well, thank you. They're welcome to go to my website, which is Chris with a K, K-R-I-S, Kluver, K-L-U, V as in Victor, E-R, chriskluver.com, or they can catch me on LinkedIn or Instagram.
Perfect. And ladies and gentlemen, those links are going to be down below. So go ahead and check those out. Check out Chris's books, which I imagine have a lot more than we've just scratched the surface on here today. Chris, I love it. I love the changing of the mindset. I think that that is so important to not just, entrepreneurial business, but also to what we do in actually writing a book, because you have to make that decision when you put it together. So hopefully our audience has some stuff to think about, and, maybe in the future we can have you on again and dig a little deeper.
Okay, love to, man. Thank you so much. This was fun.
Excellent. All right. You have a great one, Chris.